Thank you all for being here tonight to help celebrate the 40th anniversary of the first collective bargaining agreement of the Graduate Teaching Fellows Federation. My name is Michael McGee. I'm our local's current president, but I'm greatly humbled and honored to be in the presence of so many former GTFF leaders and activists and our current allies both in and outside the labor movement. It's both daunting and inspiring to be the inheritor of such a rich tradition of unionism fought for over 4 decades. But of course, this night isn't about me. It's about our local, its past victories and its future successes. Before I introduce tonight's guest speakers, I want to recognize the organizations and individuals who helped make this event possible. Our sincere thanks goes out to our parent organizations, AFT Oregon, AFT National, and the Oregon AFL-CIO for their financial contributions to this event, as well as both monetary and logistics support from the Oregon Labor Education Research Center and the University of Oregon chapter of the Student Labor Action Project. So join me in thanking them for their support. In addition to these organizations, I want to extend a special thanks to all of the individuals who put in countless hours over email, phone, Skype, meetings in the union office over the past 1.5 to almost 2 years to make this event possible. Jessica Neefy, Bill Rattery, Michael Marchman, Ellen Galuli-Kress, Ricardo Frias, Shauna Meehan, Kaylee Peterman, Glenn Morris, and Emily Sutton. Please, all of you, stand to be recognized. I helped a little too. I would also like to extend our thanks to the hardworking food and event services staff working here tonight. They're often undergraduate student workers whose efforts to gain union representation and dignity are opposed by the university at every turn, despite their central role they play in making this campus operate. So thank you very much. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank all of the GTFF alumni who came here from near and far to celebrate with us, and as well as all of our Oregon Union cousins from SEIU 85, from the Coalition of Graduate Employees at Oregon State, from Graduate Employees Union up at Portland State, United Academics here at the University of Oregon, and all the other locals from across the state and beyond. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we are honored and privileged to be joined by AFT President, that's AFT National President, Randi Weingarten, who will address us in a short video. Randi served for 12 years as the president of AFT Local 2, and it's not often that you see union locals with 1-digit names, so that's how you know it's important. AFT Local 2 in New York, representing over 200,000 public school educators. She was elected as president of AFT in 2008 and has since been a tireless advocate for teachers, students, and working people across this country. Please join me in welcoming her here tonight by video.
Congratulations as you celebrate GTFF's 40 years of visionary activism. Your work on behalf of graduate employees at the University of Oregon has helped pave the way for other graduate workers to organize. Like all good organizers, I know you think less about the past and more about the future, but I want to lift up your founders for just 1 minute, and I understand some of them are here tonight. They knew that grad students are in fact employees and need the protection and voice that can only be provided by a union of their making. They knew you need better wages and better working conditions. They saw that through a union that could be accomplished. You can accomplish together what would be impossible for individuals to do on their own. And so, over the past 40 years, you've been able to achieve real wage increases, paid sick leave, and good health benefits. Your active membership just hit 80% in spite of Janice and in spite of huge turnover. Your organizing and your successes are inspiring us throughout the union as AFT grad locals continue to organize and grow at Rutgers, Brown, Georgetown, the University of Chicago, the University of Illinois, and the University of Michigan. We're proud of your pioneering spirit, and you can count on the AFT nationwide, our solidarity with you as you begin this new bargaining campaign. I'm sure Mary Katherine will have more to say about Tuesday's elections when she speaks in a few minutes, but let me say a couple of words. Yes, we have a sharply divided electorate, but nevertheless, it sent two really important messages. Number one, they voted on the federal level for a check and balance on Donald Trump. In district after district, flipping the House meant decency over cruelty, fairness over prejudice, democracy over demagoguery. Second, on the state level, people voted for problem solvers as governors and in their state houses. Governors committed to finding solutions that make life better for children and families, who believe in public education, higher education, affordable higher education, who believe in good health care and rebuilding roads and bridges and water systems. Voters elected new Democratic governors in Illinois, Kansas, Maine, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Wisconsin, Connecticut, California, and Colorado, and re-elected many others like Kate Brown. And when education was on the ballot all across the country, they voted for it. The people of Oregon also spoke with your help and the help of fellow union members, and the overall message was crystal clear. They chose Kate Brown for another term because she stands up for working people who want to build a better life for their families. I had the honor of spending a day campaigning across Oregon with Kate, and I saw firsthand how she walks the walk with educators, nurses, and public employees. She sat with us at a student debt clinic. She sat with nurses at a town hall roundtable meeting, really talking about the issues that they confront. She is and will continue to be a great governor. And you also did what you needed to do to deal with all of those ballot measures. So again, congratulations as you celebrate the historic moment. And I look forward to following your future victories and accomplishments. Thank you.
We're also joined by AFT Executive Vice President Mary Katherine Ricker, this time in the flesh. Mary Katherine is a National Board certified middle school English teacher who served as president of the St. Paul, Minnesota Federation of Teachers from 2005 to 2014. And she was elected to her current position as AFT Vice President in 2012. She has been and continues to be a champion of public education and for organizing teachers both in K through 12 and higher education all over the country. So please join me in welcoming AFT Executive Vice President Mary Katherine Ricker.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be with you to celebrate this anniversary tonight. It is incredible to be able to be here and celebrate with my union family, share in the celebration of the Graduate Teaching Fellows Federation 40th anniversary of your first contract. And I think 40 years ago today, some of the people in this room had just signed the original collective bargaining agreement that you are building on as of yesterday when you launched negotiations, knowing that, Maybe some of us in this room hadn't been born yet, or some of us were barely in school. Some of us were walking a picket line with our dads because they were on strike that year. All is that to say is that this is an impressive anniversary by any measure. And I want to spend a little time about thinking of 1978 was also a midterm election year. The tumultuous 70s in general, we saw oil dependency pushing us to find alternative energy sources. The Saturday Night Massacre and a lying president were still painful, recent history. And our democracy was re-emerging back from the brink. And you decided to take your future into your own hands. You decided to organize in your work sites. And you decided to set about to practice democracy in your workplace by forging really, your own union. Pausing tonight is an opportunity to recharge, really, and take the lessons you laid out for all of us in the last quarter of the last century to apply now. To take your temerity and to continue to grow the union movement, working for the common good and save our democracy in this century. As AFT President Randi Weingarten just said in the video we all watched, in these midterms, Americans voted for a check and balance on President Trump and were clearly inspired by the women on the ballot. In district after district, they chose decency over cruelty, fairness over prejudice, democracy over demagoguery, and by electing a new majority in Congress. We did have some painful losses. Texas personally hurt a lot. Florida could hurt, but I wouldn't count our candidate out just yet. Georgia, I think we have to hold on to our hats because this could be a wild ride. Losing Senators Joe Donnelly, Claire McCaskill, and Heidi Heitkamp hurt, especially when they voted their consciences by opposing Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. But John Tester and Jackie Rosen will be going back to the Senate. And we won a lot. 7 new governors and control of the House of Representatives. And the more we go deeper into the ballot, the better we did. And when I say we, I don't just mean the Democratic Party. We means everyone here, the labor movement. Over 700 union members won their elections this last Tuesday across the country. 700! We are the people who believe in decency, in humanity, in fairness, in democracy, and in our Constitution. Like you, forging a union 40 years ago when you won that collective bargaining agreement. Over 700 union members won their elections to say, we will control democracy in our workplace and in our communities and in our states and in our countries. After 2010, in the gerrymandering of the last census, Democrats lost over 900 seats across our local legislatures. But as of Wednesday morning, and still counting, we have regained majorities in 7 chambers, gained 6 new trifectas, winning governor's mansions and both houses, and flipped a total of 350 seats from red to blue across the country. That's right. And I hope you were following Proposition 4 in Florida, which resulted in the largest reenfranchisement of Americans since the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. With story after story of voter suppression in our country, this victory is not small and it is not lost on me. And I haven't even mentioned Oregon yet, where not only you re-elected Kate Brown as your governor, who, as a Minnesotan, I like to think of as my second governor, but you got supermajorities in both houses of your state legislature, and your ballot initiatives too. Your ballot initiatives warm my progressive heart, reaffirming your refusal to cooperate with the deportation machine that kicked into high gear with this administration. Protecting a women's right to choose and supporting affordable housing and kept revenue bills from requiring supermajorities. Woo! Here's what I think. I think we had a great night on Tuesday. And I think the work we did to get to Tuesday cannot stop now. The next 2 years are going to be intense. No doubt about it. But we were built for intense, right? 40 years ago, you had to convince people you were workers. Right? 100 years ago, our union had to convince people that even though women didn't have the right to vote yet, we had the right to practice democracy in our workplace. We were built for intense. So here are my final 2 thoughts on the election. First, these midterms represented the largest Democratic electoral mass mobilization in decades. Surely in my lifetime and maybe even in yours. That is immensely encouraging for the future of our democracy, and we dare not forget how we did it. Because here's the second thing. Despair is not an option. Despair wins nothing for us. In the spirit of the 40th anniversary we are celebrating here tonight, know that we did not get a first contract here by despairing. We did not get a 40-year anniversary by despairing. We got here through vigilance, through hard work, through solidarity, and with eyes on improving our own situations and an equal commitment to the common good as well. And in this current political climate, your union will continue to fight these fights waged against people of color, the indigenous, immigrants, refugees, the right to organize a union, and democracy itself. Here at the University of Oregon, you have understood for more than 40 years that despair is not an option. Instead, you've been pioneers. One of the very first graduate locals in the country. And you have stayed pioneers in the way you serve your members and fight at the bargaining table and fight for the common good. Like the AFT, which celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2016 and has been pushing boundaries of what it means to be a union of professionals ever since. You have been pushing the envelope of what it means to be a graduate union since your founding. And look at the timing. In 1978, as you were signing your first contract, the AFT had fewer than 600,000 members nationwide. And we had just amended our Constitution to allow organizing and affiliation of healthcare workers, who now make up more than 100,000 of our 1.7 million members. You signed that first contract without knowing that the labor movement was just a few years away from its most catastrophic strike of that era and the Reagan administration's destruction of the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, known as PATCO. Damn right. Private sector union membership went on a steady decline, and that's only now starting to slowly reverse. The AFT, on the other hand, thanks to locals like yours and visions like yours, has continued to grow. Despite the recession, despite the threat of Janus, you've done it, and our larger union has done it too, by caring and fighting and showing up for our members, for our students, for our families, and for our communities. Since, like the AFT nationally, you have bucked this trend so beautifully, I think it is worth highlighting how you did that. Your founders, and those of you who followed them, were very, very intuitive. You saw far into the future and figured out what was happening in higher education. Its increasing reliance on grad employees and what those employees were going to need. In other words, you didn't just see what your members needed at the moment, but you saw what they would need in the future. You did so knowing that the university, like all universities, would claim that its growing graduate workforce consisted of students, not employees. And while you don't need to make that case anymore to your colleagues, at the beginning, you had to organize on both fronts, convincing your fellow instructors that they were employees as well as students, and forcing the university to recognize your status as workers, as employees. And your very first contract did that and nailed these issues: a 14% wage increase, standardized workloads, written criteria for appointments and reappointments. That is not insubstantial. Everyone understands the meaning of a 14% wage increase. Not only did you start receiving an extra $1 for every 7 you were already earning, but any employer who can afford a 14% increase had been drastically underpaying you all along, right? We all know how much universities like crying poverty, until they start handing out raises to their vice presidents. And boy, have you got a few of those, plus an athletic director, deans, provosts, and your 12 vice provosts. I looked this up. And so you forced them to come clean about what they could afford, and you've kept doing it. You're getting closer and closer to raises that actually match the cost of living. And it goes without saying, of course, that assistant provosts don't have to worry about such matters. Going back to that first contract, your other 2 achievements, standardized workloads and clear criteria for appointments, were absolutely groundbreaking in the higher education space. Without knowing all the details, but knowing a little bit about higher education, I can say this. Before your contracts, departments and professors routinely required wildly differing workloads and mightily preferred their decisions to appoint or reappoint their graduate workforce to remain completely opaque, subject only to their professional judgment. It doesn't take a Me Too movement for me to recognize what is written between those lines. You changed that, and I think you ought to give yourself a big round of applause. In GTFF, you've also paralleled the AFT's focus on healthcare, and once again, you've been ahead of the curve. 25 years ago, you got employer-paid health insurance written into your contract. Then you actually administer your own health benefit trust fund. That is a monumental win. That's right. You control your benefits, This is unique in the country. It has also enabled you to be on the cutting edge of benefits like trans-inclusive healthcare, to teach the rest of us what it means about showing up at the bargaining table for everyone. You are trailblazers. And while employers across the country have been sticking it to employees by cutting back or getting rid of employee coverage, you've had the vision and the strength to make sure it stays there. And then 4 years ago, you went on strike and got paid sick leave in your contract. About damn time, right? Woo! And as someone who pioneered this, seeing you incorporate bargaining for the common good into your bargaining efforts and giving a wonderful object lesson to your entire union family shows what a powerful language this means in practice. Your strike paid for sick leave turned out to be a catalyst pushing the state legislature to provide universal paid sick leave for its state employees. In your current negotiations, which I understand you just kicked off yesterday, you're pushing the issue of affordable housing for your members. This is going to be a critical issue for folks all over the country, especially in university towns. And I think it's fair to say that your entire grad union family around the nation will be watching your progress and learning as much as they can from you very, very closely. The same goes for bargaining wage increases with an eye toward a living wage for your members. Wherever there is collective bargaining and workers negotiate decent wages, wages for non-unionized workers also go up. You are providing real leadership and real opportunity for the entire community. And one of the keys to your bargaining success is your organizing success. You reached 80% membership last year, as Randi pointed out, and that is an achievement, an indication that workers here see a real value in belonging, that I'm sure you are going to hold on to now that all of us have entered this post-Janus era. What we're seeing across the country is that member engagement initiatives that we kicked off in 2016 have really paid off. Despite millions of scam emails and millions of dollars paying for billboard campaigns and mercenary door knockers aimed at getting union members to drop their membership, four-color glossy postcards being sent to all of us, our members are overwhelmingly sticking with the union. That's right. And on another front, you're bringing what everyone in graduate school knows is a huge issue to the forefront: mental health services for graduate employees into your negotiations. Finally, as Mike McGee shared with me a few weeks ago as we were talking, GTFF has transformed graduate life at the university. Mike mentioned that the fact that there is a union on campus means that you get to meet a larger cross-section of people in the graduate school working on campus from all different departments and disciplines. Just as important as those pay and benefit issues is that you have the power to make things happen, both in terms of concrete grievances and in building solidarity within and between departments. Without a union, too much clearly depended on the whims of advisors and administrators. He gave me the example that if you had made a Title IX complaint, it would go into a drawer. But now with a union, you can march into the office and ask important questions, or have a grievance campaign and bargain for new ways of doing things. For your 1,400 members, that is a great definition of power. That's right. And I also want to add that former graduate members from this union and others play a role in our national higher education agenda for the AFT. In particular, tonight I'd like to recognize Chris Goff, who is here today. He was a member, then a leader, and now he continues not only to work for you and for all of our other higher education locals nationwide as part of the AFT staff. I want to point out this connection that was planted here. Chris was the principal author of the AFT Guide to Higher Education Locals on Resisting White Supremacy on Campus, a uniquely GTFF and U of O contribution. How many of you know of that document? All right. Well, I don't know if anyone knows this, but let me connect these dots for you. Our locals in Florida used this guide to successfully organize against Richard Spencer on the Gainesville campus last September. You did that. You did that. And I want to take a moment to thank Chris for all of his contributions and let you know your influence expands beyond this campus. From the national perspective of the AFT, I want you to know that you are on the absolute cutting edge of creative organizing and sophisticated bargaining, providing outstanding leadership in building locals and negotiating contracts in the context most people thought was next to impossible. Because you saw the ability to resist the powerful pressure to think of yourselves only as individuals, constantly competing against each other for fellowships, teaching assistantships, prizes, the attention of senior faculty, or academic jobs. Instead, graduate employees across this country, like you did here, have demonstrated what imaginative organizing and real solidarity can bring to a complicated, difficult profession. It's why we feature your inspirational successes in the AFT conventions, the press room, and our State of the Union report. As higher education continues to increase its dependence on graduate employees, your work, your example, continues to grow in importance in our union. Finally, you and the GTFF are giving your fellow grad employees everywhere a lesson in what it means to be part of a national union. Organizers and members from Georgetown University, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Chicago have all reached out to you for advice and solidarity. In your 40-year arc, you have transformed yourself from an upstart to a true mentor, to a valued resource for grad locals just feeling their way in this union movement. This is a wonderful sign of your maturity as an organization and a credit to everyone who built GTFF over these last 40 years. I cannot wait to see what the next 10 years will bring, the next 40 years will bring, what your 50th will look like, what your 100th will look like. Congratulations on your anniversary. Thank you for letting me celebrate with you.
Hi, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I'm so excited to see so many people here from so many generations of GTFFs. I am very proud tonight. My name is Jessica Nafee. I'm the former president of the GTFF, and I'm here introducing Jane McAlevey. Jane McAlevey is quite an inspiration to myself as a fellow, both academic and activist. Jane has traveled all over the world, taking her experience and her knowledge to train new people in member-up organizing. And this was really inspirational for me when I became president. I actually met Jane for the first time almost 2 years ago at the Higher Ed conference the conference in which I decided to run to become president of the GTFF. At that conference, I first heard about Jane's book, and in all good academic style, I forced all of my soon-to-be officers to also read that book. And that was the inspiration for our movement last year that got us to 80% membership. So I hope you join me in welcoming Jane McAlevey as our keynote address for our 40th anniversary. Thank you very much.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Jessica. It's lovely to be here. It's a really, really, really great day. It's a really good event. I want to thank Jessica for that. I didn't quite get all the transitions in the history of how it is that I walked into the room tonight, but I'm delighted to be here. I know I got an email from Mike McGee, more than one email, actually. Like, they just kept coming. That was a good thing. Persistency, that's part of what we do. And I, sort of like Mary Katherine and folks before me, I have to say that one thing that we don't do very well in general in the progressive movement is like celebrate our history and celebrate our victories. And you're celebrating your history tonight, and it's a really important thing to do because we just don't do it enough. And honestly, before I get started, I want to say, it's hard to win a union campaign. Like, I've spent most of my life helping workers learn how to win a union campaign and win many other kind of campaigns, by the way, right? Affordable housing fights and fights against racists. And I love the story of the anti-racist guide. I can raise my hand now and say that I heard about it, but and I want to see it. But in some ways, it's not harder, but what's equally hard and not as well recognized in the work that we all do is actually maintaining and sustaining a democratic union. Like, actually keeping a union together for 40 years is a really hard thing to do. It's not just hard to do it with a union, it's hard to do it with any organization, right? Like, there's one thing, there's the building phase, which is monumental, right? So that's congratulations to all the alum here, it's totally amazing. But then the other thing is, it's really hard to maintain them, and it's really hard to sustain them. And democracy is messy and complicated and filled with people like us and many others, and that's really messy and complicated, right? Because humans are. As we know. So I really want to celebrate you for surviving and thriving at the 40-year mark. And for the record, it's super clear to me, like, whenever I go to Michigan or Wisconsin, I'm just going to say it all started in Oregon, for the record. So there you go. I learned a little bit of that yesterday, so that was kind of fun. I'm like, all right, I got the note clear about where it really started. But it's actually really important. So I want to try and do what I like to do, what I can never not do, which is talk about building power. The two things I like to talk a lot about are winning and building power, and there's a relationship, I think, between them. So if you let me do so for the next 25 minutes or so. Feel free to drink, be merry, all those things. I'm going to show mostly pictures. There'll be a few words up there, but not many. Promise it's nothing like the American Sociological Association or any other academic slide you may ever have put your, I don't know. I always want to, the first time I went to an academic, so for me coming back to do a PhD at age 45 was rather amusing. For so many reasons. But I did it. But I remember the first time I went to an academic conference, the first time that Frances Fox Piven, who was the PhD advisor I had at age 45, after dropping out of college and dropping out of high school and dropping out of everything ever, all through my life, the first time she said, you need to show up at an academic conference for the first time. And I went. And I went to like the first session. And I was like, Jesus, these people couldn't organize like a lunch for two. And then I went to the second session. And I was like, oh my God, it's like 1-point font and 20,000 words on a screen. Anyway, so I was like a little bit alarmed, like, yo, academia, you know what I mean? So then it was so I've been recently a proud member of the PSC in New York, right? Carried my AFT grad union card from age 45 to age 50. That was an interesting thing to come back and be in grad school with a bunch of people who were considerably younger and have a great union where, by the way, we already had great mental health benefits if you're looking for some good language or, whatever. But so I want to talk about I want to use the 40 years of your incredible work, really, to sort of just recheck in on some core concepts that I consider to be the core concepts. And anyone who did read No Shortcuts, like Jessica, will be familiar with some of the stuff I want to run down quickly this evening, because this is a party, right? This is a celebration. It's a party. But by the way, if we don't get a lot stronger really soon, the whole thing is going down, right? Whether it's the IFCC report on climate change, or whether it's what's breaking out in DC, and all sorts of things I don't want to get into necessarily, because they're just downer topics, like the entire country right now is difficult. Like, we may have had some good wins, and I respect that we definitely had some good wins. I spent the day getting sucked into the details with a bunch of reporters of the Florida recount, because we're back in a bunch of recounts. And if Andrew Gillum wins versus if the racist DeSantis actually gets to steal that seat in Florida, it's going to have everything to do with whether or not we actually get the new ballot initiative implemented correctly. Because we know that winning the votes is one thing, and then actually getting a law implemented is something very, very different, right? So imagine if DeSantis comes in and they're trying to implement felon reenfranchisement in Florida heading into 2020. You think that law is going to get implemented real fast in the next 2 years? If DeSantis keeps the seat? No, right? So there's a lot of struggle going on in this country, and we all of us, me included, need to get better at the work every day. The more we do it, the better we get. The more we do it, the better we get. So I want to just run through with you, share some ideas, some reflections on what I think is happening right now, and share some thoughts that come from No Shortcuts with all of you. And then hopefully continue to, be merry and chat and whatever. Okay, enough about me. But that was me. So just in the interest of time, I don't want to spend much time on that, but I come from a really strong union family, union household, and I want to ground myself in the 1978 strike that you mentioned you were on, Mary Catherine, I think, with your father. So my father's third wife, it's a little complicated, but she was the leader of the her AFT local, and I think it was also 1978 that I was on a picket line at Hillcrest Elementary School. So my father was a politician. I grew up in a super political household, a trade union household. I was mostly on bumper stickers, which is what you see on the bottom there. That's a little me, which was a very familiar face driving around upstate New York. So I grew up in a trade union household where learning how to count votes mattered. From the time I was born, there was controversial vote counts happening in our house. And my old man, who was married to a teacher union leader, did say to me at the time, it's not enough to just run on a progressive slate, you actually have to win. And then you have to do something about it, right? So it's sort of like my orientation to the world. Who cares about the books? I only want to put their faces up for a minute, because I think it's the context, not even a minute. A minute would be painful. But I want to start this by reiterating what I got up here and said, which is, for all the good things we just achieved, there's a lot that we need to do better, a lot, right? So that's enough of them. I just wanted to show them for a second. Oh, God, and I had to sneak him in. Yeah, because you have your own local guy right here, who last I looked is kind of like the informal power structure of the university. Is that true? Right? He pulls grant money, threatens stuff, undoes university policy. So just to make a point about them, the truth is they are not messing around right now, right? The Koch brothers, the guy in the bottom left, the moron on top, these people are not messing around, and they're actually kind of winning. So underneath all of our celebration, they're getting away with a lot. And I don't want to look at any of them for too long. But by the way, this dude who's successfully making me jump up and down for joy when he markets Colin Kaepernick is the 38 wealthy, he's an example of everything wrong with this country right now, right? He's marketing Colin Kaepernick, which makes you feel excited, woo, Colin, oh, and then you're oh, Nike. Anyway, so he's also the 38th wealthiest person in the world. And by the way, because I can't look at them anymore, by the way, when I talk about the 1%, I was reading a statistic the other day. There's so many really bad ones. And one of them is, do people now know 3 people, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates, this is the new stat, just 3 of them have more wealth than 50% of America. Right? And he's not far from it, Knight. So we have a lot of work to do, right? So I'm here to say that in a happy, upbeat way, because I'm an organizer, and I love the work we do, that all of you are doing, every one of us. But there's a lot more to do, and we have to get better at it all the time. So when I think about the 1% that I'm just describing, from Phil Knight to the 3 before him to the 3 guys who control more wealth than 50% of America, they're doing it in a way that we're seeing being let out of the White House right now, right? I call what's happening in this country right now a boss fight in the White House. And by a boss fight, I mean a union boss fight that's being run out of the White House. It's a campaign of terror. It's all about fear. It's pitting worker against worker, neighbor against neighbor, black against white, Christian against Jew. And it's like neoliberalism gone crazy in this country right now. And it's in the White House. So part of what they have been doing so well is cultivating the strategy of like individualism. It's all about individualism. And I think if we keep clear that part of what they're trying to do, and they're doing very successfully, is like unmaking the modern working class, the contemporary working class that you all helped build back in the 70s, along with many others. If we keep in mind that their goal is building individualism, then for me, it's super clear about why our goal is building more and more unions. Because unions are about overcoming the idea of the individual. Trade unions are about building fundamentally solidarity across the working class and saying that actually together we can accomplish something against these guys and not alone, right? So the idea of waking up every morning and building solidarity is particularly important in today's day and age at a time of intense division in this country. And that's part of why unions matter so much. So we know, and again, I'm not going to dwell much on this. I want to get to a few slides about organizing and then, stop and celebrate your history again. But we know that the 1% right now is super invested in turning education into a private corporate scheme by which they can make money. And in 1990, sometime in the late 90s, I first read something in the Journal of Private Equity that talked about teachers' unions being the #1 problem with the privatization of K through 12 education in America. So in the mid-1990s, in the Journal of Private Equity, they were talking about the strategy to take out teachers and education unions on the way to privatizing and making a lot of money and turning students and kids and education into a profit center for themselves. And we have done a pretty decent job of stopping it so far. We have uneven victories, frankly, right now in terms of stopping it. We know there's more charter schools. We know there's more vouchers. And we know that they are not done. And we know that, for example, because right now in the state of California, we still don't know who the superintendent of schools is going to be. So as I flew out of California, there are still over 1 million votes not counted in California, and they are pitting the guy on the right who may not look like Betsy DeVos, and he may sound a little bit better, but his name is Tuck, and he's basically a billionaire-backed SOB who wants to privatize the entire education system of California into charter schools. And it's in a recount in blue-thinking California. So a billionaire-backed pro-charter candidate is in a runoff against an actual educator, Thurmond on the left-hand side. So that's one of many undecided elections in the country right now. So people think of California as like this cool blue state, and I'm like, we got a lot of work to do, folks, right? If we're sitting in a runoff with a billionaire-backed privatizing charter guy running against an actual educator in the state right below you, we didn't do quite as well as you did up here. So I'd like to say California could learn a thing or two from Oregon, which is a nice concept, right? So, and the other thing I wanted to do was just talk for a second about, like, I was struck yesterday, and I'm struck by the 41 years. I'm struck by the time from when ahead of Michigan, ahead of Wisconsin, a bunch of people here got together and started to form a union. I'm struck by the difference in what was happening in that period and what's been happening for the last 40 years and how we got here. So I just want to put a few out. So GTFF is formed 41 years ago. In this country, in the 1970s, plenty of you know this history because, like, we're in an education sector union. But in the 1970s, strikes in the public sector were raging in this country. Yeah. And because strikes were raging in the public sector in this country, the Supreme Court gave us a decision called the Abood decision, which is what gave us the right to collect fees and actually try to build stronger unions in the public sector. So I want to keep that connection super clear for everything else I say. There were a lot of strikes happening, and there was a political context that set the stage for a Supreme Court that actually gave us a pro-worker, pro-union, pro-working class ruling in 1978. That's the decision that, fast forward to this year, we're having the celebration of the signing of the first contract, different than the beginning of the hard work that was done, to form the union here. We've been in a period of until this spring. We've been in a period of almost no strikes, post-Patco, post the disaster called Reagan. We've been playing way too nice against corporations and capital, in my experience, for a long time, like way too nice. And the result is we're losing our rights. And the result of not creating, frankly, hell and what I like to call creating a crisis. My mentors taught me, McAlevey, if you don't create a crisis going into a tough contract campaign, if you can't create a crisis for the employers, you can't win. Right? And we saw a bunch of education unions creating crisis this year, thank God, for their employers and winning. But the context of us losing rights in two major Supreme Court decisions this year, which is the Janus decision and the Epic decision, the context of that is that we've been far too acquiescent. And the result of being far too acquiescent is that there seems to be no consequence to having a Supreme Court that's ruling against the working class pretty much every single session for the last bunch of years. So, like, for example, what did they say? I don't want, again, not many words. I'm going to show you some pictures, but not many words. But, like, compared to 41 years ago, in the opening, this is in the opening of the Supreme Court ruling in the Janus decision this year. And the key sentence for me is, whatever may have been the case 41 years ago, by the way, part of what was the case 41 years ago was the founding of your union, right? And a whole lot of strikes in the public sector. So in the Supreme Court decision, taking away the rights of workers to form strong unions, they said, whatever may have been the case 41 years ago when Abud was decided, it is thus now undeniable that, quote, labor peace can readily be achieved through less restrictive means than the assessment of an agency fee. What does that boil down to? We haven't been causing chaos for them for a long time. We haven't been creating a crisis for the employers for a long time. So they are rolling over us like tanks. Frankly. And I think we can see so many lessons in just 2018. It's amazing. So the first thing I want to say about what we need to do, what you need to do going into this contract fight, because you got some big stuff. I heard that the RAISE, I want to turn that into like Aretha Franklin respect. If I could sing, I would. But like when I was listening to the demands yesterday at the rally that spelled out the raise, I heard some serious structural demands, not just like money demands, but actually structural demands, right? Not just around affordable housing, right? Right? Give it up for real demands. So to win those real demands, right? Like a big one is summer funding. That, as you know, that's a structural demand. That's changing the architecture of your contract. Now, just listen to Mary Katherine, listen to folks yesterday, meeting people, talking to folks here. You've won other key structural demands, but that's a structural change to the architecture of your contract. And to win, it's going to take a hell of a fight, I think. It's not the same thing as saying 999 or 333 or 121212, or it's not just the fight for money. You're actually fighting to change the structure of the employment contract in a really serious way. So that's a really, really, really big change. And to do that, it's going to require something really important, which is, frankly, not just high participation, but unity and a tight structure. You're going to need a lot of participation. 80%'s good. But I asked yesterday, had there been a structure test, my two favorite words, structure and test, since, and the answer was probably not. So I just want to stand up here and be like, I don't know how much more exciting I can make the concept of structure tests. Like, woo! Structure tests! But we need to start having some more of them, right, in the contract fight to know that we're going to win things like banning ICE from campus, winning serious structural change in terms of like summer funding, winning childcare for like parents who are like working parents, right? These are major fights that you're going to have. So if you want to win the hardest parts of the fights, getting really, really ready is going to require not just high participation, but it's going to require really tight unity, a really tight structure, and what we like to call demonstratable and sustainable majorities and supermajorities in this fight. Like that's the organizing work that has to happen to carry home the victories that I feel confident after meeting both the people who mentored this union into being and the people who are in the inheritors of it. I feel like you can do it. Like it's super obvious that you can do it, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of work. So that's the exciting news and the like, woo, but there's a lot of work to do. So I want to just mention a couple more things. One is, can we just applaud that photo? Like, there's an article There was an article in the New Yorker magazine, which I want to urge you to read yesterday if you haven't read it. Just like Google New Yorker magazine, teachers, elections, teachers and midterms. You put that in the search bar and you're going to get to an amazing article that sums up that part of what led to many of the victories we just had in the midterm elections, including meeting David and talking about what's going on even here, right, with the elections here, like including even here, where Kate, apparently your governor, did not run from the idea of PERS and the pension system and pension funds, but actually talked about, like, standing up for PERS. Seriously. Like, when's the last time a governor was like, I'm campaigning for a public employee retirement system? Not in a long time. And part of the reason why governors felt comfortable saying things like the word PERS is because there were these incredible strikes in the spring that were by educators, that frankly have changed the narrative more than every other attempt, that so many things I had to read about in literature and academia, like all these attempts at narrative change and storytelling and all this stuff, it's like, stop. Here's what just changed the narrative of the United States of America. That. Yeah, that's right. Chicago teachers in 2012 changed the narrative, won things, changed things, and inspired a hell of a lot more. And that strike and walkouts like it, and 100% walkouts, okay, 95% walkouts, are literally not just what brings home structural changes for American workers in this country, but also changes the narrative and changes the outcome in American elections. Let's just be super clear. Strikes matter. And we need a lot more of them. And there were so many totally beautiful ones. This was Arizona. Like, were you all crazy like I was? I couldn't leave my computer for several days at a time during all the strikes. Literally, like I was like glued to the television. So strikes are, in the language of sociology, for just a second, for fun, because of the room. You know, I'll pretend like like I did a PhD for 5 years, which is not where I learned any of this really, but anyway. But strikes are like productive, right? Of more and better things, like winning in the midterm elections. And a whole slew of teachers were part of the people who won elections in a bunch of these states. And it is super exciting to see it happen. So even North Carolina, like they didn't get as much love in the national media, but like I love that picture so much from the North Carolina walkout when 35,000 workers were in the street in North Carolina in May. Because you can see these three people looking out and going, oh shit. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think those three people are saying? Like, oh, right. Like, oh my God, we got trouble coming. So I think I was going to do more, but I don't think I want to do a lot more because it's just like, it's like a party. We're having a party. And it's that time of night. So I want to make just a few closing comments, which is, besides that strikes really matter a lot. And they're not easy. And they take a lot of work. And they're really hard. And they're really important. And if we don't start doing more of them, we're going to lose the whole country, like in a serious way. So here's the sort of closing argument, which is not really an argument for people in this room. But it's more of one that I think we need to carry in really bold ways out into the world. There was, in No Shortcuts, I outlined sort of three concepts, which was the difference between advocacy, mobilizing, and organizing. And I spent a few hundred pages trying to define out the difference between those concepts, because I think they really matter. So the 40-year period where we went on a deep slide, we the labor movement, and and along with us, frankly, we the progressive movement, right? Like as slides the working class movement, as slides the country. So the 40-year slide that began just after the heroic work to start this union is in some ways like mirrors the entire argument I made in my dissertation a couple of years ago, which is that we stopped doing real organizing in this country for a long time. We shifted into a model that looked more like advocacy and mobilizing. And what I laid out in No Shortcuts was that mobilizing was the confusing one. That people seem to understand the difference between advocacy, like you write money, a check to Greenpeace or the AARP or some group, and then they make decisions and go lobby on your behalf, like that's advocacy. But then you would talk to people, I did for like years, and I'd meet someone and they'd be like, hey, and I'd be like, what are you doing to win on whatever they're working on? And they'd be like, well, we're doing grassroots organizing, it's great, whether I was in a union context or a community-based context. And I'd go, great, so what are you doing? And then they would start to tell me what they were doing, and I was like, that's actually not organizing. That's mobilizing. Because what mobilizing is getting the already with you to an event. to the polls, to an action. So the people who are already with us, we get them out to something. And we didn't get quite enough out in Georgia, Florida, let's go through the states, a bunch of places, right? And in California, like we're sitting in a frickin' recount with a few thousand votes between a right-wing charter school SOB and a really good educator, right? Like I can't believe we're still facing those choices in, blue state, left coast California. It's not, right? It's like we have a lot of work to do. So what I tried to lay out was that mobilizing had come up, and that people were very confused between a concept called mobilizing, which I outline as a more staff-driven, staff-heavy, workers and members become like props. Like we bring them out for press conferences and put them up and they tell their story, but they're actually not the lead agents in the work. They're not actually doing the work, they're not making the decisions. And organizing was brought back into the fold, into full view for us by the education strikes this spring. That's about worker agency. When West Virginia walked out, it was a 100% out, 34,000 people out strike. From the cooks, to the bus drivers, to the teachers, to the aides. And that strike took the country by shock, right? And like the unsung heroes of that strike, I keep saying, and West Virginia teachers are always agreeing when I say it, like the unsung heroes of that strike are the bus drivers, by the way. Because when I interviewed all the superintendents on the phone, the superintendents all said to me, yeah, well, if the teachers alone went on strike, we would all the assistant principals and people would be in the room playing kickball and doing nothing with kids, but it'd be a different situation. But when the bus drivers, in a movement that was built from below in that state, decided to go out with them, after initially being told that they couldn't go out with them, and then a really lot of education going on, and decided they could go out with them, the superintendents of the schools, in a ton of interviews I was doing with them on the phone, because like little West Virginia, they actually answer your phone. Hi, I'm calling from the Nation magazine. It's shocking. The superintendent's like, oh, okay. No one ever called a superintendent of schools before, apparently, in West Virginia from the Nation magazine. So they were all they're all taking the calls, which was shocking to me. And they literally said to me that every single morning they called up the head of their local bus drivers union to say, are you guys going to work today or not? And if the bus drivers said no, the superintendents could legally, which was important for them, hang the I'm not opening schools on a school safety issue. So that's the kind of solidarity I heard coming out at the rally yesterday. You had classified, non-classified educators and not at the rally. And that's the kind of solidarity that we need, not just to win structural changes in your contract this year, but actually to change America and make it so we're not debating some moron another billionaire-backed charter school privatizer below you in California who might become the superintendent of schools. We need way more of this because we are facing a Supreme Court that is not going to be a help to us for, unless there's a baby still here. I think the baby left and went to bed. So since the baby's gone, I'm going to go out there and say that we are facing for the rest of our lives a Supreme Court that's going to be a problem and not helpful. It's different than the Warren Court that allowed for the creation of advocacy and mobilizing. We are going to go down in the court system. The political system is whacked in terms of gerrymandering, voter suppression, corporate donations. We're down to one last thing, to the original thing that gave us power as workers, and it's the right to strike. And we need to strike, and strike a lot. And congratulations on your 40 years. And I'm honored and flattered to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me to share this day with you. And I can't wait to hear about summertime pay and banning ICE and child care and everything else that you're going to bring home in this round. No pressure. And congratulations to the founders of the work, too. Go get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Hi, everybody. I have the incredible honor of wrapping this whole weekend's events up. If you don't know me, my name is Michael Marchman. I'm the staff organizer for the GTFF. Thank you. I have a million things that I want to say right now. One of them is that I want to say thanks to Jane McAlevey, because you've inspired me and you've inspired the people in this union, and these lessons that you're sharing with us are ones we are taking extremely seriously, because you're right. So thank you. And Mary Katherine, Ricker, thank you very much for coming and talking with us as well. I want to say, as Mike did before, thanks to all the incredible alumni that are here today. I cannot tell you what an honor it has been to spend the last couple of days with you, what an honor it has been to work closely with Bill Rattery over the last year or so, and a whole bunch of GTFF members, current and past, to make this event happen. I found it to be an incredibly inspiring, productive, bold, wonderful weekend, and I hope everybody else did as well. We need to thank, of course, all the allies that are in this room and those that aren't in this room, but that along the way have been crucial to the success not only of the GTFF, but to all workers at this university, in this state, and across this country that are still fighting like mad and finally clawing back something. And we're going to continue that, and we are going to organize deep and strong, and we are going to take this country back. I want to say thanks to all the former staff organizers that have worked for the GTFF. There's several in the room. And while we're celebrating unions, I would be remiss to point out that the GTFF staff union has 100% membership. Fighting Tigers! You're still a member, right, Glenn? 100%. We're going to use the energy from this weekend to go forward into bargaining. For people that weren't here for our opening bargaining session on Friday, you missed something really cool that we did in this union. In this very room, our bargaining team of 25 people, representing all areas of the university, all subgroups, all people that we could get in this union that we think represents the body that is on this campus, teaching classes, doing crucial research, supporting all kinds of programs on this campus. We brought 25 people in. We delivered a kick-ass set of 40 proposals to the university. And in this room, there was standing room only. 150 at least graduate employees were in this room, sitting along the walls. And the university had to sit and listen to us articulate everything that we want, everything that we need, and everything that we are going to demand that they provide for their employees on this campus. That was a hell of a way to start this 40th anniversary weekend. I want to give kudos to the current group of members in this union, all of the people that have served in office, and all of the rank and file members who have busted their ass the last 3 years since I've been here to make us ready for this bargaining session, ready for Janice, ready for the fight that's ahead of us, because I couldn't be more impressed at the work that people are doing and the dedication that our members have shown. It is amazing to be a staff organizer and to just be helping. Right? To just be helping, because the members of this union know what they're doing. Mike is doing a fantastic job as president, but he is also building on work of many, many people before him. Jessica, who was president last year, Katie Mannion, who was president before Jessica. She's not here, I'm sorry. Shauna Meehan, and many, many other people that sort of laid the groundwork for us to be where we are today. So we're going to go into this bargaining year, and we're going to fight for what we need as graduate employees on this campus. And we are going to fight not only for ourselves, but for this community, and for as wide as breadth as we can get to try to to make some movement, not just on this campus, but in this community and in this state and in this country, because as Jane said, we are facing tough times and we had best have our shit together. And we are working on that here. So before we all break and chat and hang out, I want to make sure I say to everybody, safe travels for everybody that came from a distance to be here. It's really been an incredible day. I know this energy is going to carry a lot of our members for this year and beyond. One more thing. I've been told I say one more thing a lot. One more thing. Before we leave, we are, of course, going to sing Solidarity Forever. So on your table are sheets, some large print, some smaller print. Pass those around and let us do this time-honored, amazing tradition.
Just going to get us started. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet one force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one.